Welcome to the Writing Corner. My name is LD Valencia. Today I want to talk a little bit about fantasy tropes that I decided not to go with in my fantasy book. So if you didn't know, I wrote this book, The Undying Dragon. It's a book about these paladins that have magic armor, and they have to use them to defend this queendom from dragon attacks. And in my book, I really wanted to do a couple of things, maybe a little bit differently than maybe some fantasy books, but there are obviously a lot of tropes that I still use, but I want to talk a little bit about how I kind of like went against some fantasy traditions and conventions and did some things differently. So the first one is the fact that all races seem to be very divided in fantasy books, right? I feel like in almost every fantasy book that I've read, it's like the dwarves are here, the elves are here, humans are here, and if there's any other fantasy races, they're in other places, and they don't ever intertwine, they don't ever intermarry, they're all just kind of like very much separated, right? In my world, I actually decided to do the exact opposite. I personally am of mixed heritage. My mom is Irish, my dad is Colombian, and to me, that is a really like important thing to me, this multicultural side, right? So I kind of wanted to include that in my books. So a lot of characters have, some elvish features, or I might mention that a character looks like they could be a gnome, but they have like some other features and things like this. So there's a lot of characters that are of mixed races. They are, it's almost exclusively, like there's very few times where I make a note of a character being like a pure blood of a certain race, right? A lot of times it's, this character has, a little bit of gnome, but some orc in them or something. Like I mentioned that, like things like that a lot in my books. Just because I think it's a cool feature. I don't see it done a lot. And so I was like, that's something that's important to me. I think it's a cool, unique thing to my world. So I decided to do that in my, my new book. The next kind of trope that I decided to go, not even really necessarily trope, but just kind of like trend, I guess you could say, I decided to go against the kind of trend of dragon riders. A lot of times people ask me when they hear about my book, or if they like see it at a book event or something, they ask me like, oh, are they dragon riders? And I actually have to tell them, no, they actually are not dragon riders. It's actually the opposite. Dragons are the bad guys. And so in my world, the villains are dragons. At one point, dragons ruled the world, but now humanity and people have kind of like thrown off the shackles of the oppression and now kind of like govern themselves. And so the idea of dragons being like friends and everything is kind of something that I've not really played with in this one, because again, I think it's overdone. I think it's used a whole lot, and I decided to do something a little different in my books. So it was not a trope or a trend that I really wanted to like use in this one. Maybe in other books, maybe down the road I'll do something, because I love dragons and I can see myself writing about a lot of different takes on dragons, lots of different variations of them and everything. So I decided to do something different. The third one, and this is more like a D&D type thing than a like actual book thing. In my book, there are not just like one type of dragon. I feel like a lot of books, dragons breathe fire, and that's pretty typical of dragons. But in my books, there are different types of dragons. There are different variations of dragons. There are dragon cousins even, right? There are like species of things that are dragon adjacent, right? Amphitheres, drakes, wyverns, all of those are in there, but there's different variations of them. Similar to D&D, where you have like your chromatic and your metallic dragons, I decided to go with like kind of gemstone dragons, which are kind of tied to my elemental system. Each element is tied to a gemstone, right? So like fire magic is tied to rubies. Like red rubies would produce fire spells and magic and things like that. And so ruby dragons are fire dragons, and then your wind dragons are diamond dragons, and they can produce wind effects, and when they're around there's different like weather effects and wind type things that might happen because they're nearby, right? So instead of just having kind of like a one kind of type of dragon, there's like variations of them, and no dragon is like another, and one dragon is not necessarily better than another type of dragon. So in D&D, which was a big inspiration for my book, I will definitely say that, I've never loved the fact that it's like rubies or red dragons are at the top, and then you have like the other ones and then like for the chromatics at least, it's like white dragons are at the bottom, and it's like just they're always at the bottom. A white dragon of like ancient level can never be or never really, I guess, be a red dragon of the same like age, I guess, because that's kind of how they're categorized. I just was like, I feel like, eventually a certain one could, right? At least like based off of the CR rating and the D&D like core materials. So I've kind of made it known in my series that like, you know, any dragon could potentially be another dragon depending on the day and the powers and the ancientness of that dragon. So that was something else that I was kind of like, I saw in D&D that I wanted to do something a little different with my dragons. And there's other aspects of my dragons that are unique and different and as well, but those are a couple things that I saw in fantasy, and I guess you can say in D&D, that I wanted to kind of do a little differently and kind of wanted to play against type, I guess you could say, in my world, because I wanted mine to feel a little bit different, a little unique, and kind of wanted to like do something a little bit unique with the way my dragons work in this world. So those are a couple of tropes and things that I did differently in my book that I hope you are intrigued by, and you see that and you're like, oh, that's interesting, I like that, or I would check that out because of those differences, or maybe it just helps mine to stand out a little bit, and that makes it more appealing, hopefully. If not, that's totally fine. Not every book is for every reader, and I totally understand that. But if you do want to check out The Undying Dragon, it is available on Amazon and my TikTok shop. You can get them there. Signed copies are in my TikTok shop with a book box with lots of goodies. And so if you want to check it out, you can check them out there, and hopefully you'll enjoy. Thanks so much for joining us in the Writing Corner. My name is LD Valencia. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and join us for our next talk into books and reading and all kinds of other reading and book related things. Thanks so much.